the immediate vicinity that have great significance, spiritual and religious, and I think few people who live in this area maybe appreciate that. My duty this morning is to introduce the president of North Idaho College, Dr. Bennett, who will have a few words to say. Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. Every year I have an opportunity to start this series, or a series very much like it, and I'm always very proud to do so because I think that North Idaho College is quite unique as far as community colleges go in that it spends considerable time and effort and money to bring an outstanding series to the community each year. And I think one of the really exciting things about it is that it's open to the public at no charge. If on the back page you'll note of your program, you'll note all the people, the faculty members that were involved in helping put this together, and I think special thanks has to go to Tony Stewart, who has worked through the Popcorn Forum for several years. So Tony, I want to thank you personally in front of everybody for this special effort. This particular series, I think, promises to be very popular with people, and I think the size of this crowd is indicative of what will be happening throughout the rest of the week. I've said since I've been here that my hope sometime at 10 o'clock in the morning is to completely fill this place to the rafters with only a little bit of walking room. I suppose Katie would keep us from being in the aisles. But to make it so exciting, and this one certainly will be, the people will want to be here and we'll have to turn them away. And I know that's Tony's goal as well. So I think before the end of the week, that's probably what's going to happen. I just want to thank you for all of you for coming. I think you're going to find this to be a very interesting and exciting series. And I hope that you go away from here with your mind stimulated and also something that you can take back to your class. And as I've said so many times, this is an experience that's bigger than any one class. And really, that should be part of a college education as well. That you should have some experiences that go beyond whatever happens in the classroom, takes you to a larger dimension. And certainly with the theme of great mysteries of our time, perhaps that will do it for you this week. It's my pleasure to introduce to you a fellow that has really been kind of a partner. We've worked together on several different things. He's president of the North Idaho College student body, and he has helped me on a number of occasions. One in particular, I took him down to Boise when we were meeting with all the people, the legislators, and Rock got up and made a presentation about North Idaho College that I know all of you would have felt very, very proud about. So I've always had a real fond place in my heart for this young man. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's going to be doing a lot of exciting things in the future. So he wants to take just a few minutes and welcome Rocky Owens.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bennett. And on behalf of the Associated Students of North Idaho College, I would just like to welcome you all here to this 22nd Annual Popcorn Forum. I had the privilege of serving on the planning committee for this week, and I can truly say that we have some of the most outstanding authorities on a fascinating subject. And because of NIC's relatively smallness, it gives you an opportunity to involve yourself that is not present in other universities and colleges around this country. In particular, the panels gives each of you an opportunity to have dialogue with the speakers and share your opinions and ideas yourself. This is an annual project, as I said earlier, and we can, as Nick is, or the Associated Students of North Idaho College is interested in building well-rounded students and having a well-rounded atmosphere for each of its students. And we sponsor many things such as talent shows, other comic nights and different activities. We kind of like to think of this as our intellectual activity because it certainly stimulates the mind. And let me say that whether you choose to believe any of these ideas that you will hear this week or not is your right. But I can guarantee you that after hearing these ideas, your life will have new meaning. And after all, isn't that what education is all about? Giving one's life more meaning. I hope you have as much fun and enjoyment in listening to the speakers as I have had in serving for the planning of this week. Thank you, and I hope to see you this week.
Loren Coleman and I go back a few years. It was about 1981 that I happened to be in a bookstore at the University of Washington and picked up a copy of Mysterious America. This is the new edition of it. By the way, there are copies back here for sale. As I thumbed through the volume, I happened to turn to page 276 and noticed that under the title Lake and River Monsters of America, that Lake Coeur d'Alene and Pend d'Oreille Lake were both listed. Having lived here quite a while and been raised in Spokane, I was somewhat surprised because I hadn't heard any of the stories about those particular bodies of water. And it set me off on a research quest that resulted in my publishing a book on Lake Pend d'Oreille here several years ago. I have to either credit or curse Loren for getting me started with this business, and I find that now it's turning into a full-time occupation, just gathering folklore and stories about the area. And I guess I do thank him for stimulating me in that manner. Loren is a research associate with the Edmund S. Muskie Institute of Public Affairs at the University of Southern Maine. I think it's important to recognize that he has what we call a straight academic job, where he does, at least in some quarters, what is considered to be serious work. And along those lines, I should mention several books that he's published with regard to his serious work. His graduate work is in psychiatric social work, and he's written or co-authored books such as Suicide Clusters, Working with Older Adoptees, Elder Fire Safety for the 1990s, and he has a book coming out, I guess this isn't really, in the psychiatric social area entirely, but a book on JFK called JFK Conspiracy Graveyard. So he does a lot of what we call mainstream or traditional research, but what fascinates me is, I guess, if I could put it this way, by day he's a serious traditional researcher, by night he is transformed into a cryptozoologist and a person who's interested in the mysterious and unusual and anomalous. It's rather unusual to find somebody who's has all of that in one sensibility. Most people are either one or the other. They're either interested in straight research and they think all of this other business is nonsense, or they're interested in quote-unquote nonsense, and straight research is another kind of nonsense. So it's interesting to have a person who has a foot in both of those camps. Loren has done undergraduate work too in anthropology and zoology, so he's got quite a varied background in several different fields. Besides the research that he's done and publications in the traditional realm, he's also done or published a number of books, The Unidentified, Creatures of the Outer Edge, Curious Encounters, and of course I mentioned Mysterious America, and the recent book called Tom Slick and the Search for the Yeti. So you see he has a diverse background and is a person who is very interested in things around us, and I'd like you to welcome Loren Coleman this morning.
Thank you. Let me turn on my remote here so that we move around. It's nice to be in Idaho. I've noticed many similarities here. You have moose and trees just like we do in Maine. Additionally, though, I notice you have a lot of cowboys and all we have is lobstermen, so we seem to be ahead in that area. Mysterious America, the title of this talk, is really an overview of a lot of things that I've been doing for over 30 years. I've been going around the country, talking to individuals, talking to different witnesses. It's a reflection of what I really hope to do today, is kind of give you a little mini tour of the United States, of the undiscovered, the unexplained. This will be my version of this country's reality, just for this morning. Suspend whatever you believe in, whatever you really are attached to, and kind of open your mind to what may be some possibilities. I'm a follower of an individual named Charles Fort. Maybe, do you want the spotlight on all this time? It's in the way of what I want to do, which is move around. So anyway, Charles Fort, I'm what you call a Fortian. Fort is F-O-R-T. And he really believed that there was the possibility of things that had not been explained. He was born in Albany, New York in 1874. And as he grew older, he started going through old newspapers, old scientific journals, and coming up with bits of data that he would call the damned. And by the damned, he meant anything that science had excluded. In the 1920s and 30s, actually, he had put together a couple books that were very interesting to a large group of people that became known as the Fortean Society. The Fortean Society had such individuals as Ben Heck, Wendell Oliver Holmes, Tiffany Thayer, Bucky Fuller. All of these individuals were the intellectuals of the time, and they were very interested in Charles Fort's books. The books of Charles Fort, they're called the books of Charles Fort now, were named the Book of the Damned, New Lands, Low and Wild Towns. Charles Fort had a certain philosophy which we all really are kind of familiar with today as Zen. He really believed that one measured a circle starting anywhere. That if you looked at any of this evidence, it actually was only one part of a continuum. You would come up with a bit of evidence and it would lead you to something else, which would lead you to something else. And it really didn't matter where you would start on this continuum, according to Charles Fort or any Fortians. It induced some open-mindedness, of course, but it really was related to all else. And I want to get back to the word that Rocky used, which I tend in my presentations and my way of looking at this. I don't really believe any of this. I accept that people are having real experiences, that they believe are real. We don't know what all of those are. We don't know what the process is. We don't know what the stimulus is. But I don't believe in a religious sort of way, and most Fortians don't really believe in a dogmatic sense that this is data that should be thrown at the feet of science and said, well, look at this, start investigating this. We figure, in sort of the investigative journalist sort of way, something's out there, these are real people, they have real experiences, let's not ridicule them, let's have some respect for what's going on. Some things I will not be talking about today because what I like to do is look at things that are pretty tangible. I will not be talking too much about poltergeist experiences. Poltergeist experience, of course, is from the German word noisy ghost, poltergeist German. And these turn up any place, anywhere. There seems to be some relationship to having adolescents in the family, so maybe it is a form of psychical energy, or PSI, as it's often called. But I tend not to really get into talking about that too much. The other thing I won't be dealing with really too much is something called spontaneous human combustion. By the way, this is the grossest slide you'll see today, so rest assured. This is the leg of Dr. Bentley here at the bottom of the screen. Dr. Bentley of Pennsylvania experienced a rare phenomenon called SHI, spontaneous human combustion. It seems to be an intense blue flame that comes from the body, consumes the body, as you can see in this circle here. This was actually, you can see his walker there, he was some kind of invalid, and it burned right through the floor, except the hands and legs are often left there. In one of my straight projects that I wrote a federal grant for and got funded on elder fire death, I had dealings with a lot of fire professionals. And it's interesting, spontaneous human combustion is one of these things that's right at the edge of being
acceptable. There's actually some manuals that are being written now by fire professionals on how to deal with spontaneous human combustion. So this may be one of those 40 subjects that becomes legitimate science in the near future. What I will do for you in terms of, there's different levels of people that I'm talking to here in the audience, I know, and some of you really want to become researchers and go out there and do some research. Other people obviously are here just for interest. What I'll kind of walk you through for some of you is what I do in terms of my research. One thing that I always do before I go any place or research anything is do some basic background research. I try to get different sources. I look at the books that are usually regional. Thank goodness there's a Jim McLeod here who's gathering some of that material that will be lost to the ages without people like Jim. This is a book from the New England area by a folklorist up there. And it gathers those kinds of stories that one would look for before traveling to an area. I never go on a vacation anymore without kind of acquainting myself with what's going on in that area before I go there. So if I have time between taking the kids to Disneyland, I can kind of go over and look at the Mystic Walls or something. So it's a different kind of vacation, but it's quite enjoyable for me. Journals and magazines, of course, are very important. They oftentimes are sources of information, but they're not timed. So if you're an investigator who really wants to get on top of things, you've got to be well acquainted with your local press, their treatment of this material, or if you're going to an area, what is the local press saying there? Newspaper articles are the only way nowadays that you're getting reports that's on this level. This is from 1962, as you can see from the Louisville paper, about the Tribble County monster, or Tribble County beast, thing that various witnesses described as more lion-like and other witnesses described as more gorilla-like. You can't get this stuff from journals or magazines because nobody's doing it anymore. It's just not the things of interest. TV programs, too. The local news used to have a lot more of this stuff. They used to have more time for local interest, but now with their satellite uplinks and their connection to the networks and their interest for ratings, sure, you might have something on the latest sex crimes or the most violent murder that's happened locally or whatever, but you won't have usually some good, mysterious line items unless they make fun of it, because the sort of Dan Rather School of Journalism is that make fun of these things and maybe they'll go away. So TV programs are not a good source of information anymore. I always like to check original sources and really dig back beyond what's said in some of these Charles Berlitz collections of strange phenomena. I like to know who saw what, when did they see it, what date did they see it, what's the exact site, what's the address, if I can find those kinds of things. So when I go to track down these people, I can really try to find where they're at. For instance, here's a man in Decatur, Illinois, at the local alligator crossing. In 1966, there was a 13 baby alligators were caught, and a 12-foot alligator, a 6-foot alligator was actually seen. This is a kind of story that only a local press would get into. What's interesting, and another thing back to Charles Fort about this, is that Charles Fort is the individual that invented, created, and used first the word teleportation. And by teleportation, of course, we mean the transportation, the sort of mysterious transportation of a thing or a person or an animal from one location to another. We all know Star Trek, where Scotty beams up and down people. That's sort of our knowledge about teleportation. Well, teleportation is a Charles Fort word, and definitely comes from the Fortean tradition. And it does seem to happen. There's alligators turn up in the weirdest places. You have armadillos turning up in Michigan. You know, it goes beyond the wild trade in animals. Because you can dig back into the 1800s and find some of these things before some of the exotic animal trade was going on. Whenever talking to locals, I always let people know that don't ignore those gas station attendants. You know, it's terrible that there's all these self-service stations around anymore because we're losing a lot of local folklore. So I tend to go to a lot of stations that are full service because at least you can talk talk to that person. So they have information that is incredibly relevant to the local area. You know, I oftentimes go to a place where I know there's a lake monster, kind of drive into the gas station, talk to somebody, and find out that here this farmer has had some cattle mutilations over in Vermont, and maybe it was in the paper last week, and maybe I'd want to go over and talk to him. Cattle mutilations are, by the way, for people that don't know about the mute phenomenon, is that it's a mysterious draining of blood and cutting off of ears and different various seemingly ritualistic things done with cows. There's all kinds of candidates for who are doing these cattle mutilations, from Satanists to UFOs to neighborhood high school pranks. But it's definitely something that in the 70s spread across the country. Here I am falling asleep during an interview, but at least it shows that I'm well aware that the local police are also an important part of all of this. People don't know where to go when they see something strange. So they see that Bigfoot or the lake monster. Who do you turn to? There's no Ghostbusters in reality. Nobody has my telephone number, and I can't afford an 800 number. So they usually go to local police. And of course, there's always usually somebody on the local police force that is at least open-minded and is willing to go and talk to these people. This man here, he lost 3 or 4 cows. Dairy cows, and went out the next morning, they were turned upside down in his field, completely bloated overnight. It was a cold New Hampshire night, so that it wasn't from heat. And they had been mutilated. So he knew that something weird had happened. He didn't know who to turn to, so he turned to this local deputy sheriff, who I had found out through a newspaper report was the one that was talking about this, and through him got back to the witness. What has happened with new technology, of course, is that I go around a lot with a video camera now and interview witnesses. These individuals in the Hockomock Swamp area of Massachusetts had reported a little red-haired ape-like creature. And I'll talk a little bit more about Hockomock Swamp later, but getting these interviews on audio tape or videotape is very important, because this is the stuff that is lost. These individuals, I can't keep up with all the witnesses I've talked to, and you can only write so much down, but it means so much more to get it in some more permanent way. I warn all the people I've talked to, and in my books I talk about things that are called mystery spots. These commercial side trips that often are out there in a lot of tourist guidebooks for a way to really introduce yourself to mysterious America are nothing more than that. They're commercial. They're there for financial reasons for the owner. They're not much better than the old carnival sideshow, where something weird and strange was in there, and just for a couple quarters you could go in and see these strange beasts. Even things like Wilhelm Reich's museum, they don't tell you that anything strange is there, but you have to pay money and go in there. And the guides usually don't tell you that UFOs were seen over the area. And Wilhelm Reich, with his cloudbuster, was very involved in UFO research, and so you almost have to be sure you know where you're going before you go there, as opposed to thinking you're going to get any clues from any guidebooks. There's other things that are obvious in the names of the places, but people, and we'll talk more about the name game as we go on today, but Seguin Beach is definitely a phenomenon that has been hardly explained geologically speaking, but it's there on a sign, and people just go to the beach and they sun themselves, and they don't really even know how to make the beach sing. Here I have my wife demonstrating the proper technique for making the sand sing. You have to kick it, and it makes this very strange sound that you don't hear at most beaches. So there's probably some logical explanation for that, but most people don't even get into that. They just kind of sun themselves. One of the mystery spots that is in the United States that has mystery in its name is Mystery Hill in New Hampshire. This site has been dated to at least 4000 BC. This is called the altar stone because they believe that there was human sacrifices here, and you can see there where the blood drained down and all of that. Maybe it was nothing more than a press for local tomatoes or something. It definitely had some kind of human involvement here with the grooves, and there's all kinds of megalithic. You can see the wall behind there, and it's definitely a structure. It covers about 6 acres. You pay a minimal amount of money and go around and see what they now build as America's Stonehenge. Because of all of the magnetic hills and mystery spots where you go in, you put a broom up and it leans over, you put a ball on the floor and it goes uphill and things like those. Those are all optical illusions, so they've kind of ruined mysterious America places like this. But Mystery Hill in New Hampshire is definitely a real site that you can go to and has been taken care of. There are other places, and this is from Mystery Hill too. They call it American Stonehenge because it has these 4 stones that each of the solstices and equinox where the sun sets over. This is sunset on the winter solstice. It seems to be an early megalithic site in America. Petroglyphs. There's petroglyphs all over. McLeod showed me some around here, and the round is just you have to go out there. And these ones are in Hawaii, and nobody knows who made them. They're pre-native peoples that are there now. There's certain traditions about some of these, but nobody really knows who did them. These are the mystery walls of Berkeley, California. Berkeley, right outside of San Francisco. Anybody who's been there, you know how well populated it is. Well, there's some eastern parks, some provincial parks there. And I had this man who I found out through an article, Russ Swanson, who showed me around and showed me these walls. These walls used to be over 6 feet tall, and because of different farming activities have been lowered. Nobody knows who made these. Here we have Fort Mountain State Park in Georgia, where you have quite a few walls and structures. This is one of the pits. There's not a person in this picture. I unfortunately have my wife, but she doesn't like me to show it because she's sort of squatting in the hole. But in this area, it's about the size of a person. And I'm part Cherokee. And the Cherokee Indians have a tradition here that Fort Mountain was there before they were there, and that they were built by small white people. Nobody knows who these small white people is. Nobody knows who made Fort Mountain. And these kind of mysteries are all around the country. There's a line of forts all across southern Illinois like this that line up quite nicely. They all are on top of bluffs and hills and things like that, but there's no water source in them. So nobody knows the answers. And this is Dighton Rock in Massachusetts, which is almost like an early graffiti board for explorers. There's evidence that there's American Indian carvings here, that there's carvings from Vikings, Phoenicians, Portuguese, and Egyptians. Because there's a very large southeast Massachusetts population of Portuguese, most of the things that you read about this say that this has carvings of Portuguese on it, but we don't really know. A lot does seem to occur in rural areas. I think there's a new movement in the UFO field, and maybe the speaker tomorrow will talk about this, to really acknowledge that some of these UFO abductions are happening in downtown Manhattan. My focus on Fortean phenomena and cryptozoology has really acknowledged that if you live in a rural area, you're closer to nature and more things do happen to you. And especially if you live in a trailer. Trailers are almost like hormone boxes, there's all that sexual energy in there and it seems to attract the phenomena. There's so many giant birds and gorilla reports there, trailers that I was thinking about writing a book on at once. But anyway, this is a trailer in Durham, Maine, where in 1973, a gorilla-like creature came there and terrorized these people for many weeks. Trailers really, if you think about it, are the last vestiges of civilization on the outskirts of many areas. So you can have hundreds of acres of trees right on the other side of these trailers. So I've lived in a trailer and had some of these experiences, not the weird ones, but the sexual ones. The other thing that you want to do is, of course, bring your camera so that you can do your slide lectures and show people that you've been there, the proof. Well, here I was in Willow Creek, California, near the Bigfoot statue. Willow Creek, of course, is a very rural area and is really the sort of launching off period to Bigfoot, the launching off spot for Bigfoot country in California. This statue was carved by a friend of mine, Jim McLaren, and he's not there anymore, but the statue is. In Illinois, where I lived many years ago, a lot of rural areas have a lot of different reports. What happens, of course, is that the local police sometimes get pretty upset with these kind of strange reports, so they lock off the areas. In this field, for many nights, teenagers in their cars would come down here and see the Bigfoot creature that came and attacked their cars or would get very close to the witnesses. So when I went there about 10 days later, the sheriff wouldn't let me into the field, but at least I thought I'd take a picture of it, and I was able to track down the witnesses and get their information on what they'd seen. They said the creature's eyes were this big, and so I took this picture. Farmer City is in Illinois. It's in DeWitt County, which has its county seat. It's Clinton. I'm just saying this so you can put it in the back of your mind. It's not a commercial for Bill Clinton, but it has to do with the names that keep coming up and all of these things. Here's the Farmer City monsters that was reported to me and drawn by one of the witnesses. In Wisconsin, in the 60s, there was quite a few reports of these Bigfoot-type creatures, and what started coming out in a lot of the Bigfoot reports from the east is that they were not the usual Western kind of Bigfoot. You can't really see it here, but all of the police and witnesses described the footprints almost as if a man or woman wearing fins, swim fins, was walking through the snow. Of course, they were much bigger and very deep and things like that. And oftentimes you see newspapers acknowledging this, as you have here in Arkansas. The latest Arkansas wonder, three toes. And further on in the south, as you go a little bit over to some of the bottomlands, you have what's called the skunk ape. And they, obviously, local people, different places call this overall skunk ape different things. The Everglades ape, skunk ape, gorilla, or green chimp, for instance. It was called green chimp because there was a glowing, moss-like fluorescence on this thing. And a friend of mine, Brad Steiger, did a lot of investigations there and wrote quite a bit on that. Not very often do things like the skunk ape get national attention, but the National Observer in 1971 did do a rather large article. What's interesting in some of these articles, though, because people, witnesses or people that are investigators, are often afraid of ridicule, the location of the monster that was given in this national article was about 500 miles off. They'd given the wrong island on purpose. They didn't want other people to go there. So that's why I always comment about original sources, try to go back as far as possible. I was just in Louisiana, and in the 1970s, there was a program on In Search Of about the Honey Island monster. And so I decided to go to Honey Island and do the Honey Island tour. And of course, I always take the opportunity to push the guide to the point of wanting to throw me out the boat because I ask these very hard questions about their local reports of monsters. Here I am sitting in a boat that they've named the Wookiee, as in Star Trek, because they know that's the local name of the monster, but the guide would not talk about it and tried to throw it off as, well, that's not really true, and those guys were drunk, and things that were not true himself. But I think the most interesting thing that I learned on this trip wasn't that there was a monster there that Kevin Costner had come the week before when he was filming JFK. So. I understand one of the strange phenomena with this machine is trying to focus it. We take too much for granted in a lot of the things that we do day to day. Think about the street you live on, or think about the places that you travel by every day. You probably have put so much of that into your daily activity that you've really kind of not thought about what's going on. I think that unless the place that we're going to is called Sasquatch Provincial Park, we don't really think about that there might be a possibility of monsters being there. So what I do and what I've written about is to try to really push yourself to thinking about what are the hidden meanings, what's going on with some of these words, what's going on with some of these places that we take for granted as we travel to, as we visit, as we camp at, as we investigate. A lot of them are pretty sinister, the names, and maybe there's something there. This is a great slide. See, Devil's Elbow, B-Y-O-B. Devil's Elbow and the whole relationship between devil's names and Fortean phenomenon, strange phenomenon, is quite direct. When Western Europeans came over here and came to some sinister, mysterious, bizarre places, and that they had these kinds of experiences over and over again, they would label these Devil's Elbow, Devil's whatever. Sometimes it's a geographical thing where the thing is sharp and it's dangerous and people fly off the roads with beer cans in their hands and stuff like that. It might be related to that, but sometimes it's something else. You have in the state of Idaho, I was looking up in my book, a place called Seven Devil's Hills, or Canyon. There's a long history there of cattle mutilations that goes way back with some UFO reports. Right across the state line, there's a place called, is it Hell's something? You probably all know it anyway. You know, those kinds of things keep cropping up and they're really obvious. There's, what happens is that you have things that are even more hidden that also seems to happen. Westerners, of course, would label devil, but what happened when Westerners would move to places and take over American Indian or Native people's names? The same thing would happen and they would not even acknowledge it. The Hockomock name, for instance, which is an Algonquin Indian word for the devil, or at least that was the Western translation. There's a peninsula, a bay, a cemetery, a swamp, up and down the coast of the eastern United States that have the name Hockomock. Without doing any kind of scientific research, but kind of going through my files, these places over and over again have mysterious phenomena connected to them. And it often happens with one or two incidents. Here we have Bill Bartlett, unfortunately making a fool of himself for my benefit. In 1977, Bill Bartlett was one of 3 witnesses over a 25-hour period in a straight line, if you've drawn on the map in Dover, Massachusetts, saw this creature, the Dover Demon. It was about 5 feet tall, unrelated to UFOs or anything, just kind of mysteriously appeared in different parts of Dover, Massachusetts. Had skin like sandpaper, and glowing orange eyes. It just would sit there for Bill Bartlett as he drove by, and then he came back and tried to find it with his friends and couldn't find it. Another witness described it as walking down the road towards him. Couple witnesses described it as crossing the street, the farm street in Dover, Massachusetts. Those kinds of things happening over years and years and years give places the name Devil or Hockomock or whatever. The Kelly creatures of 1955 in Kelly, Kentucky. These creatures, about 12 of them, terrorized a family there for about 2 days. They took their shotguns and would shoot these little silvery creatures, and they would kind of bound backwards and roll back into the woods, get up and rush the house over and over again. This report has really been buried in the UFO literature, but it's very much as a Fortean kind of story. There's evidence and feelings that this Kelly creature, along with some of the Roswell, New Mexico stuff, is the reason that we have in our whole way of looking at UFO people the little green men, because these things were definitely bizarre. They weren't exactly green, they were more silver, but some Air Force official right after this said, "We don't believe in little green men." Force got involved in investigating this quickly, made it quiet. I believe Native peoples should be taken more seriously in their traditions. There's quite a tradition in this country, in the Ozarks, in some of the Black Forest area of Pennsylvania, in some of the locations out here, of course, of thunderbirds. And if you go back and you look at some of those reports, you'll find that there's quite a bit of evidence for a large condor-like bird that existed way outside its past territories in California. And in fact, these reports still continue, very sparsely. Here again, back to 1977, this is the Lowell family in Logan County, Illinois. This boy here, Marlowe, was picked up by one of two birds that were gigantic in size and carried across in front of his trailer and dropped when his mother came to the door and screamed. Unfortunately, this is a sad story, though, because what happens is nobody believed him. And he got beat up at school. People started leaving dead eagles on his porch. When I went there with my brother a few months later and talked to him, it was very hard for them to want to discuss any of this. And they had to know that I'd written books and was interested in this stuff and wasn't going to laugh at them for them to really talk to me. But these large bird reports still continue today. Mothman, a fantastic story from West Virginia in the 1960s of this headless, glowing red-eyed creature that John Keel popularized quite a bit. It's just an amazing thing. They would lift up and fly off with no flapping of wings. And they don't seem to be these thunderbirds, they seem to be something else. I mean, I don't know what they are, but they're something. These reports started on State Route 66 in West Virginia. Then you have the Flatwoods monster of 1952, seen by several little boys and their mother, Mrs. May here. It just kind of floated across the ground, scared the jeebers out of these people, and then left. Because that was the era of a lot of UFO investigations, the Air Force got very involved in this. There was reports of a rocket nearby that had landed or had been seen shooting across the sky. And so for some reason, the Air Force got very involved in Air Force intelligence. So we're still trying to figure out what that was all about. The Jersey Devil is an example of a story where you have many different kinds of creatures. And of course, from nice hockey team, we now know about the Jersey Devils as a name. But the Jersey Devil is really one of those local names that collects a bunch of different stories. There's Bigfoot reports, there's flying creature reports from this Jersey area, and there's kind of orange horse-like things. These all really have been grouped under the Jersey Devil. Back to the name game, the Jersey Devil was investigated and shot at by Stephen Decatur, the U.S. Navy officer. And Decatur is one of those mystery names that keeps cropping up in a lot of reports you get from Decatur or Decaturville or whatever. And Decatur is translated as the dweller at the sign of the cat. And what I have found over and over again is that there are lots of reports of black cats. Here's one from somebody said that it came up to their swimming pool and drank out of the water and then took off. In the eastern United States, of course, there's not supposed to be any mountain lions left, but about 71% of the cats that are seen, the large mountain lion-like cats, are reported to be black, and they are still cropping up. I think I have a friend in Maryland that collects these, gives them to conservation officers and stuff, and he had 71 new reports just from last year of these strange cats from the eastern United States. Fayette is another very, very interesting word. Fayette, of course, is from the French fay, and et, meaning little, for little fairy or little enchantment. And Lafayette, of course, came over here. He was a friend of George Washington, very involved in that whole movement during the Revolutionary War. And Fayette, Lafayette, Fayetteville, and LaGrange, which is the name of the place that Lafayette had as his mansion in France, seem to be areas that almost harmonically and magnetically gather these reports of strange phenomena. There are 18 counties and 28 cities and towns in the United States that have FAIA, and over again, they keep coming up with these reports. The name game goes into the number game, and 66 and 33 over and over again come up in these reports. The trilogy, I don't know what it is, but this is the illustration of the blue phantom of Route 66 in Illinois and in Missouri in 1952. Up and down this highway, a blue car, obviously a 1930s model or something like that, would go along and shoot at people. No one was killed. There was one little crack in one windshield. The police car on a couple incidents actually chased the blue phantom, but it was never caught. I have in my books various special lists that I've devised to help people. There's the list of lake monsters that Jim talked about. There's the list of different regional books that talk about these things. Alligators, ghost sites, phantom trains, mystery spots, haunted locations. So any people who are really interested in this may want to go to the library and find my books and try to figure out some things that may be going on or someplace you're going. What is happening in the whole phenomenon of cryptozoology is that the animals are getting stranger and stranger. In 1974, a couple of Chicago policemen were going down one of the back alleys of Chicago and they came up against a kangaroo. The kangaroo started fighting with them. And they couldn't catch it. It hopped away. And for the next 2 weeks, throughout northern Illinois and northern Indiana, people would see these kangaroos, find their footprints, but never catch them. This is let's see, a little focus problem, but this picture was taken, the red dot in the last slide. Oops. Where the red dot is in Wisconsin was where this picture was taken of a kangaroo out in the brush. Just kind of popped in there and popped out. This is a true example of teleportation, as far as I'm concerned, as much as true or real can be used in any of these kind of presentations. Then there's the lake monsters. I think you have a wonderful little booklet here by Jim that everybody should read locally if you're really interested in lake monsters. It talks all about your local lake monster. And you also, it's not very far to go to see Ogopogo in British Columbia. Champ, of course, is one of the most famous lake monsters in the New York, Vermont area, Lake Champlain. This picture was taken in the 70s, and the woman kept it in her drawer for 3 years, and they had this little joke in their family. They called it the giant duck, because they were embarrassed. They didn't want anybody to learn about it, and one of my researcher friends, Joe Szynski, through a friend of a friend, had heard family friends talking about this joke, and finally was able to dig back and find this piece of evidence, which is pretty convincing that something was there. Creatures of the Black Lagoon, of course, are another bizarre things that are showing up. But these leathery, almost science fiction creature all along the Ohio Valley have been reported for quite a few years now. And we just don't know what to make of them. When I go into any area, I try to be open and listen to a whole bunch of different things. And once again, to get back to the name game, what we have happening here is these locations with these kinds of names tend to turn up over and over again. And it seems to be related to the last word there, Mason. There seems to be something going on connected to the Masonic movement, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. UFO reports happen quite frequently all over, and we see a real change. I try to view all of these reports through a cultural screen. You have to look at the time and place that you're at, and what's happened is in the 1940s and 50s, there were lots of lights in the sky. And we went into a period of people accepting the notion that UFOs were landing. And now we're in a period where there's more abductions, there's more close contact, and I hope you come to the presentation tomorrow so you can learn much more about that. One thing that I do warn against is people in the Fortean phenomena investigation area using another unknown to explain their unknown. This whole notion that cattle mutilations are all related to UFOs, I think, is short-circuiting of the research and scientific method to try to get at some of these things that are going on. The Mattoon gasser I put in to remind you that don't forget about your children. Ones of you that have children or will have children. There is a way that's coming into our culture of this material. I don't know how many of you out here have heard about monsters in your pocket, but they're great little toys that my wife and I put in birthday cupcakes for the kids. And they've got a new series in which they have the Jersey Devil and the Loch Ness Monster and the Abominable Snowman and the Mad Gasser and Mattoon. So those are great ways to tell these kids about these new traditions and new folklore that really are coming into our culture in a way that is almost creeping up on us. And really not too obvious. I think that you all should retain your sense of humor this week. People, especially, too bad I'm not here for the Friday presentation, but I think that the individuals that call themselves skeptics and have to explain all this away, as I, from knowing Jim and Andy, I really do, are really missing the whole point of the fun of all of this. There's a lot of stuff going on in our culture that's not too much fun, and I like to look at cartoons like this. You can't even see the kangaroo up top. But this is a Playboy cartoon that, I don't know if there's somebody up there that can move so we could just see the kangaroo. But this is really a getting into our culture of some of these jokes that are from Fortean phenomena. 2 police officers in Chicago saw the kangaroo and it kind of disappeared. And that kind of stuff is happening. And then there's the whole business about the jackalope, which I guess you guys have those out in Wyoming, right? I have actually physical evidence of this creature because my brother in Chicago sent me a mounted head of this creature. The Jersey Devil is a hoax. This goes to our Friday presenter, I think, is that I certainly believe that 80% of these reports are misidentifications, mistakes, hoaxes, and, just plain not true. But there's a 20% hardcore that are incredibly unexplainable. And I think those are the ones that interest me, and those are the ones that I certainly try to get at. Charles Fort said, "We have had some experience with conclusions that were said to be obvious." Too often, to come in and try to explain all this way, there's a thing that a term that Charles Fort invented called the wipe. And by the wipe, he meant the newspaper and the media comes in, they have a 7-day wonder, they're very interested in the phenomena, it sells newspapers, gets people excited and interested, but they've got to get rid of it. They've got to have the wipe. And this happens over and over again. One of the most recent examples of the wipe that has been talked about quite a bit is called the Loren Report, but we'll get to that in a minute. As far as with Masons, and I want to make sure that you understand what I'm saying here is not criticism or derogatory towards Masons. In fact, I think that if you look at the secret knowledge that is available in Western culture, the Masons are one of the only groups that have really ritualized this, compartmentalized this, and made it an organized effort to do something with it. I'm not a Mason, but I certainly have read quite a bit about it and understand that as a sort of, we give a lot to the Native Americans, for instance, about they know something we don't know. They were here first. They can call places Hockomock. We can kind of wake up and say, my God, there's sinister devil stuff going on here. Maybe we should pay attention to that. I think that if we back up a little and look at certain peoples in our own culture, we can learn some things from the Masons. And they're cluing in to some things that harmonically are going on in our culture. The founding lodge of the highest order of the Scottish Rite which has 33 degrees of really levels of membership, was begun in Charleston, South Carolina. If you read different esoteric authors, you'll find that that is very significant. And if you draw a map, take a map and draw a line across the southern United States, you'll start finding that along that 33-degree line, you have some very interesting things happening. The Civil War started on this line, and a lot of people are brave enough to go out a little beyond what's rational and what's conventional or traditional, feel that one of the main causes of the Civil War may have been a jurisdictional dispute between the Masons. The northern part of the jurisdiction is north of the Mason-Dixon line. Mason-Dixon, good? Mason-Dixon line, and below it, in the 48 states, there's 33 states. Well, here we have that starting right there, right at the 33-degree line. We project ourselves ahead quite a few years, and we find that whoever was doing this, and in one of those strange coincidences, here we have the first atomic bomb was exploded right on the 33-degree north latitude at a place now called the Trinity site. According to the American Guide, Texas, there's a site where attack occurred at Dealey Plaza. We have the triple overpass, we have the Trinity River, and we all know what happened there. November 22nd, 1963. By the way, today happens to be the 11th anniversary of the attempted assassination on Reagan. So I just found out about that this morning. Dealey Plaza was the site of the first Masonic temple in Texas. I'm not saying I have any answers or know what's going on, but I'm just pointing out, as Oliver Stone said, past is prologue, and we have to learn and look with an open mind in a different way at some of these things that we are taking for granted and happening all around us. Thank you. There'll be questions